The gravy was still steaming. My son Richard placed a thick, legal document next to my plate, its crisp white edges a stark violation against the mahogany of the family Thanksgiving dinner table. Then he slid the keys to my own house, the one I built, the one where he was born, across the wood until they clinked against my water glass. His wife watched, a tight, approving smile on her face, doing nothing. "We'll take it from here, Dad," Richard said, his voice soaked in false sympathy. I stared at the keys, the brass worn smooths from decades of my touch. Outside, a cold November rain lashed against the windows of the century-old Victorian house. Each drop, a tiny hammer against the glass. The warmth of the dining room felt like a lie, a stage set for my own execution. The scent of roasted turkey and sage stuffing, once a comfort, now choked me. This wasn't a transfer, it was an amputation, performed without anesthetic, in front of the people I loved. "It's a simple, quick-claim deed, Arthur," Richard's wife Cynthia chimed in, her voice like ice chips in a glass. "Just a formality. It makes the estate transfer seamless later. Less tax for everyone." She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the signature line. "Richard has power of attorney. He can sign, but we felt it was more respectful if you did it yourself." Respectful. The word hung in the air, a phantom of decency in a room devoid of it. My gaze drifted past them, into the small study visible from the dining room. There it was, my late wife's dusty roll-top desk, Eleanor's sanctuary. A hulking piece of oak I had bought her for our 20th anniversary. It was cluttered, disorganized, a relic of a past life. Richard had always hated it, called it a behemoth, an eyesore. To me, it was the heart of the house, even if that heart had long stopped beating. Now, it just looked like another piece of my life about to be discarded. Richard followed my gaze and scoffed. "Don't worry about that old thing. We're having it hauled away with the rest of the junk on Monday. It smells like mothballs and regret." He turned back to me, his smile unwavering. "We're doing this for you, Dad. You know that, right? Dad can't handle the upkeep anymore. It's for his own safety." His words were a perfect echo of the plan I'd overheard him discussing on the phone just last week. The rest as a family, my niece and her husband, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They stared at their plates, suddenly fascinated by the patterns on the china. Their silence was a verdict. I was an old man, a burden, a problem to be managed. The document on the table wasn't paper. It was a cage. The pen Richard offered me wasn't plastic. It was steel. I thought of teaching Richard how to pitch a baseball in that very backyard, the ghost of a memory now a bitter taunt. I picked up a pen. The heft of it felt final. My hand trembled, not from age, but from a surge of cold, clarifying rage. Richard's expression softened into one of pity. He mistook my fury for frailty. That was his first mistake. He saw a 78-year-old retired architect, a widower lost in his memories. He didn't see the man who designed foundations meant to withstand earthquakes. He didn't see the husband who made a sacred promise in this very house. I signed my name, Arthur Finch, on the line. The ink was a dark, ugly smear on my life's ledger. Richard immediately scooped up the paper, folding it with a triumphant snap. "There, all done. See? Painless." He stood up and clapped his hands together. "Now, who wants pie?" The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had just stolen my $1.5 million family home, my legacy, and was already moving on to dessert. The ticking clock had started. I had until Monday morning. After the charade of a meal was over, Cynthia helped me pack an overnight bag. She moved through my bedroom with the detached efficiency of a mortician, folding my shirts, avoiding my eyes. "Richard has already set up a lovely room for you at the Golden Pastures residence," she said. "It's top-rated. You'll have a view of the garden, a gilded cage. They weren't just taking my home. They were curating my decline, packaging it in brochures and pleasantries." I walked through the hallways of my home for what felt like the last time. Every creak of the floorboards was a whisper of a memory. Eleanor arranging flowers on the mantelpiece. Richard's first steps, taken right here in this hall. The scent of old paper and wood, a familiar comfort wafted from the study. It was the smell of Eleanor's desk. Richard was right. It was old. But it wasn't junk. It was an archive, a promise, and he had dismissed it completely. My granddaughter Chloe, Richard's daughter, caught me in the hall. She was only 17, and her eyes were wide with a conflict her parents didn't share. "Grandpa, are you okay?" she whispered, her hand clutching a textbook. "Dad said, he said you were having trouble." I saw the doubt in her face, the flicker of loyalty to me, warring with the narrative her father had spun. "I'm fine, my dear," I said, patting her hand. "Your father is a very persuasive man." Richard drove me to the assisted living facility that night. He called it a 5-star resort for seniors. It smelled of disinfectant and despair. The walls were painted a sterile beige, and the air was thick with the quiet hum of medical equipment. My room was small, a box with a window overlooking a manicured, soulless patch of lawn. "The movers will be at the house at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday," he said, placing my bag on the bed. "Don't worry about a thing." I lay awake all night on the too-firm mattress, the unfamiliar silence of the facility pressing in on me. The ticking clock wasn't just about the eviction. It was about the legal system. Once that deed was filed with the county clerk on Monday, my chances of fighting this would dwindle to nearly zero. Richard was counting on my slow, elderly confusion. He was counting on me giving up. He had planned this coup with meticulous, cruel precision, leaving me with a single weekend. Friday morning, I used the payphone in the lobby. They monitored residents' room phones and called an old friend, a lawyer named George. I explained the situation in clipped, urgent tones. George sighed, a heavy, tired sound over the line. "Arthur, he has your signature and power of attorney. A quitclaim deed is brutally simple. Fighting it means proving you were coerced or incompetent. It's an uphill, expensive battle. He's got you cornered." This was the first crushing wave of defeat. But it was under duress. I insisted, my voice cracking. "He humiliated me in front of my family." "And your family will testify to that?" George asked gently. The question was a punch to the gut. Of course they wouldn't. They were either complicit or cowards. Richard had isolated me perfectly. The law, it seemed, was not designed to measure the weight of a son's betrayal, only the validity of a signature on a form. I felt a sliver of false hope. I remembered a safe deposit box Eleanor and I had kept. Maybe there was an older will, some document that could supersede this. I spent all of Friday afternoon on the phone with the bank, navigating automated menus and skeptical branch managers. Finally, I got someone to check the records. "I'm sorry, Mr. Finch," the woman said, "but that box was closed out 6 months ago. The contents were released to the secondary account holder, a Mr. Richard Finch. He had been planning this for months. A slow, methodical theft of my life, piece by piece, while smiling and asking about my health." The betrayal deepened, spiraling into a dark, bottomless pit. He hadn't just taken the house. He plundered our shared history, emptying out the last private sanctuary Eleanor and I had built together. The scope of his greed was more vast than I had ever imagined. He didn't just want the house, he wanted everything. Defeated, I returned to my sterile room. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the beige wall. All I could think about was Eleanor's desk, the sheer physical presence of it. Richard saw it as junk, an obstacle to be cleared for his new, modern life in my home. He had no idea what was inside. Not money, not jewels. Something far more powerful. Something he, in his arrogance, would never have thought to look for. My memory sharpened. I focused on the desk. The desk had a false back. Eleanor had shown it to me once, laughing. Her grandfather, a cabinet maker, had built it with a secret compartment. It was our private joke. We kept sentimental things in there. Old love letters, a lock of Richard's baby hair, dried flowers from our wedding. But after her diagnosis, Eleanor became more deliberate, more methodical. I remembered her sitting there for hours, the scent of old paper and wood filling the room as she organized documents. I needed to get back into the house. The thought was a bolt of lightning. I had maybe 36 hours before the movers arrived and Richard changed the locks. I called the front desk of Golden Pastures, feigning a cheerful tone. I seem to have left my favorite reading glasses at my old house, I said. My son is so busy, I'd hate to bother him. Could you call me a taxi? The receptionist, a young woman named Maria, agreed, her voice laced with the patronizing sweetness reserved for the elderly. The taxi ride felt like a prison break. I sat in the back, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Every traffic light felt like an eternity. What if Richard was there? What if he'd already changed the locks? My key was a desperate gamble. I'd pictured him standing on the porch, laughing at me. The old fool trying to reclaim a kingdom he'd already surrendered. The shame of the Thanksgiving dinner was a fresh, open wound. The house was dark and silent when I arrived, looking like a ghost ship in the gray Saturday afternoon light. The spare key I kept hidden under a loose flagstone was still there. Richard, in his haste, hadn't thought to check. His arrogance was my only ally. I let myself in, the familiar click of the lock a small, hollow victory. The house was cold, the thermostat already turned down to save money. His money now, I supposed. I went straight to the study. The room was just as I'd left it, a time capsule of my life with Eleanor. Her reading glasses were still on a stack of books, and there it was, the rolled-up desk, a silent, dusty sentinel. It seemed bigger in the empty house, a monument to a forgotten world. I ran my hand over the oak, the wood cool and solid beneath my palm. I could almost feel her presence, a quiet encouragement from across the void. My hands, shaking again, fumbled with the mechanism. A specific sequence. Press the third drawer from the top, then push a small, nearly invisible wooden peg on the left-hand side. The panel in the back of the knee hole clicked open softly. The sound was deafening in the silence. Inside was a small, leather-bound folio. It wasn't filled with love letters. It was filled with legal documents, crisp and perfectly preserved. Eleanor's final act of foresight. On top of the stack was the original deed of gift for the property, the one from when my father gave me the land to build this very house upon. But tucked inside it, attached with a rusting paperclip, was a separate, notarized document. A single page. I unfolded it, my architect's eyes scanning the precise legal language. My breath caught in my chest. It was a reversion clause, a special condition Eleanor had insisted we add years ago, a weapon hidden in plain sight. The language was ironclad. The original deed of gift contains a reversion clause stating ownership reverts if the property is not used as a primary family residence by a direct descendant. But the crucial line, the one Eleanor had penned with her lawyer, was the definition of primary family residence. It stipulated continuous personal occupation by the named descendant, Richard. It explicitly forbade the property being used as a rental, a commercial asset, or being left unoccupied for more than 90 days. My mind raced. Richard had no intention of living here. I remembered the phone call in the hallway, the one I wasn't supposed to hear. He was talking to a developer. It's a prime 1.2-acre lot, zoned for multifamily. We can tear down the old place and have 4 townhouses up by next fall. The old man will be none the wiser. He wasn't preserving his inheritance. He was liquidating it. He was about to violate but one condition that kept the house in his name. The quitclaim deed he had me sign transferred my interest to him, yes, but it didn't. It couldn't erase the foundational conditions of the original deed of gift. It was like changing the name on a car title. It doesn't remove the lien held by the bank. My signature was meaningless because the property itself came with an unbreakable rule. Richard owned the house, but only as long as he followed the rules, and he was about to shatter them. I carefully placed the documents into my jacket pocket, my heart a steady rhythmic drum. The rage was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about architecture, about structure. Richard had built a house of cards on my foundation of stone. All I had to do was wait for him to make his move, and then gently pull out the supporting wall. The entire thing would collapse on top of him. I took a taxi back to Golden Pastures. I walked past Maria at the desk, giving her a gentle, grandfatherly smile. "Found them," I said. tapping the empty glasses case in my pocket. It's amazing what one misplaces. Back in my room, I used my cell phone. A simple flip phone Richard had mockingly called a dinosaur to take crystal clear pictures of every page of the deed and the reversion clause. I emailed them to George with a simple subject line: a change in circumstances. The rest of the weekend was an exercise in pure patience. I ate the bland meals in the communal dining hall, nodded along to pointless conversations, and feigned the gentle confusion everyone expected of me. I was playing a role, the defeated old man. Every condescending pat on the arm from a nurse, every cheerful, loud question about my day, felt like fuel being poured onto a fire they couldn't see. George called me back Sunday evening, his voice electric. "Arthur, this is magnificent. It's a legal masterpiece. A quitclaim deed can't nullify a pre-existing reversionary interest tied to the land itself. The moment he signs a contract with that developer or files for a demolition permit, he's in breach. The property ownership automatically reverts to the grantor's estate, to you. He's walking straight into a legal bear trap." He continued, mapping out the strategy. "Don't do anything yet. Let him incriminate himself. We need proof of his intent. Let the movers come. Let him take possession. Let him make the call. The more confident he is, the deeper he digs his own grave. We'll file an emergency injunction at the county clerk's office. The moment we have proof he's breaking the clause." Eleanor, my quiet compass. She had foreseen a betrayal I never could. Monday morning arrived, cold and clear. At exactly 9 a.m., my flip phone rang. It was Chloe, my granddaughter. Her voice was a hushed, panicked whisper. "Grandpa, the movers are here. They're taking everything." Dad is pointing at Mom's desk and laughing. He just told the men to be careful with the tina, but to just trash that big wooden monster. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa." She was crying. She was the one witness with a conscience, caring about the desk, now empty of its power but still a symbol of his disdain, solidified my resolve. It reappeared in my mind, a monument to his ignorance. He saw worthless wood. I saw my salvation. "It's all right, Chloe," I said, my voice steady. "Can you do something for me? Is your father talking to anyone? On his phone?" There was a pause. "Yes," she whispered. "He's on the porch talking to some man. He's smiling. He just said the words, 'demolition permit filed.' That was it. The trigger. The final, arrogant mistake. "Thank you, Chloe. You're a good girl," I said, and ended the call. Immediately, I dialed George. "He's done it," I said. "Chloe is our witness. He's filed the permit." George's voice was grimly triumphant. "I'm on my way to the courthouse. Now, the injunction will be filed within the hour. It will freeze everything. The sale, the demolition, his access to the property. He's trapped." For the next 2 hours, I sat in the sterile beige room, a prisoner waiting for his own liberation. I didn't pace. I didn't worry. I simply sat, letting the quiet hum of the building wash over me. I thought about Eleanor, about her quiet strength. She never fought loudly. She built things to last. A family, a home, a legal fortress around the life we had made. Richard had inherited my ambition, but none of her wisdom. My phone rang again. It was Richard. His voice, usually so smooth and confident, was a jagged mess of fury and confusion. "Dad, what the hell is this?" I just got a call from the developer. He said there's an emergency injunction on the property, some legal garbage about a reversion clause. "What did you do?" The raw panic in his voice was the first taste of victory, and it was sweeter than any Thanksgiving pie. "I believe the term is breach of condition," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "You see, Richard, you owned the house, but you didn't own the rules that came with it." Eleanor was very specific. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the gears in his mind grinding, trying to process how his perfect plan had just exploded. "That's impossible," he sputtered. "That dusty old paper, it can't be legal." "I'll fight this." "You can certainly try," I replied, the image of his face contorting with rage giving me a grim satisfaction. "But the deed was recorded. The clause is sound. George seems to think the case is, and I believe his exact word was, airtight. You filed a demolition permit for a property you were required to live in. The house is no longer yours, Richard." I could hear Cynthia in the background, her voice a shrill shriek of disbelief. What does he mean it's not ours? Richard's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. You old bastard. You set me up. No, son, I said, the word son tasting like ash in my mouth. You set yourself up. You were so busy calculating the value of the land that you never bothered to read the blueprints. A fatal error for any builder. I let the silence stretch. The movers were, by now, standing idle on my lawn, their truck half full of my possessions. The developer was likely screaming at his own lawyers. Richard's perfectly orchestrated Monday morning had devolved into a legal and financial nightmare. He had overplayed his hand so spectacularly, so arrogantly, that he had lost everything in a single move. The $1.5 million asset he had stolen was now a multi-$100,000 liability of legal fees and broken contracts. He tried a different tactic, pleading, Dad, please, we can fix this. I was trying to secure our family's future, your future, the upkeep. The lies were pathetic now, transparent and weak. My future's quite secure, thank you, I interrupted. I'll be returning to my home this afternoon. I'd appreciate it if your things were removed from my driveway. And tell the movers to please be careful with my wife's desk when they bring it back inside. The final insult, the one that sealed his fate in my mind, came next. He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. You can have the damn house, old man. Enjoy rattling around in that museum alone. But you'll get nothing from me, not a dime. You'll be broke in a year trying to pay the taxes. He still thought he had some power, some final way to wound me. He still didn't understand the full scope of Eleanor's planning. Oh, I think you'll find you'll be quite cooperative, I said calmly. George is also filing a motion for elder financial abuse. Given the evidence, the quitclaim signed under duress, the premeditated emptying of the safe deposit box, Chloe's testimony, he seems confident the court will not only affirm the property reversion, but also award punitive damages. He mentioned freezing your assets as a preliminary measure. The sound that came through the phone was a strangled gasp. I had him. Not just the house, but his entire financial world, which was the only world he truly valued. He had tried to render me powerless, and in doing so, had handed me absolute power over him. The predator had become the prey. The architect of my ruin was now trapped in the rubble of his own making. That afternoon, a different taxi took me away from Golden Pastures. I didn't look back. When I arrived at my house, the moving truck was gone. Richard's expensive sedan was nowhere in sight. My key, my real key, slid into the lock. I stepped inside. The house was in disarray. Boxes and packing paper strewn about, but it was mine. The air was still and cool, and the afternoon sun streamed through the window of the study. There, in the center of the room, right where it belonged, with Eleanor's roll-top desk. The movers had returned it. It was dusty, scarred from its brief journey, but it stood solid and unyielding. It was no longer a symbol of loss or a piece of junk. It was a throne. It was a fortress. It was the instrument of a perfectly executed, posthumous checkmate delivered by the queen of my life. I walked over to the phone on the hall table, the old landline Richard thought was an antique. I picked up the heavy receiver and dialed George's number. Arthur, he answered, sounding pleased. It's done. The temporary restraining order is in effect. He can't come within 500 feet of the property. The hearing is set for the 14th, but it's a formality. He's already lost. The news didn't bring joy, just a profound, quiet sense of order restored. The setting for the hearing was the county courthouse, a grand, imposing building with marble floors that echoed with every footstep. It was a public stage, fitting for the final act of this family drama. Richard and Cynthia were already there, huddled with their lawyer, looking pale and diminished under the fluorescent lights. When Richard saw me walk in, his face was a mask of pure hatred. The illusion of the caring son was gone forever, replaced by the bitter reality of the failed thief. I didn't sit in the back. I took a seat in the front row, my back straight, my hands resting on my knees. I was no longer the frail old man from the Thanksgiving table. I was Arthur Finch, the rightful owner of my life. I nodded curtly to my granddaughter Chloe, who sat a few rows behind me. She gave me a small, watery smile. She had given a sworn statement to George, a brave act that had surely fractured her relationship with her parents beyond repair. The judge, a stern-faced woman named Wallace, entered and the proceedings began. George laid out the case with surgical precision. He presented the original deed of gift, the notarized reversion clause, and the timeline of Richard's actions. He submitted the filing for the demolition permit, dated the very morning Richard took possession, as Exhibit A. It was an open and shut case of a breach of a deed condition. Richard's lawyer tried to argue that the clause was an archaic, unenforceable relic. He claimed Richard's intent was simply to improve the asset for the family's long-term benefit. Judge Wallace was not impressed. "Improve it by demolishing it, counsel?" she asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. "The language of the clause is perfectly clear. It was designed to prevent exactly this kind of speculation. The property was a home, not a commodity." And George moved on to the petition for damages related to elder financial abuse. He presented the bank records from the emptied safe deposit box. He presented the invoice from the Golden Pastures residence, showing Richard had prepaid for 6 months using my own savings account, to which he had gained access via the same power of attorney he'd used to threaten me. Every document was a nail in Richard's coffin. As the final crushing piece of evidence, George introduced Chloe's statement, detailing the Thanksgiving dinner and the overheard conversation about the townhouses. Cynthia audibly gasped, glaring back at her daughter, a look of pure venom on her face. Chloe flinched, but held her ground. In that moment, I saw Eleanor's strength in her, a quiet integrity that could not be bullied into silence. Richard was called to the stand. His arrogance had curdled into a sullen resentment. He denied everything, claiming I was confused, forgetful, and that he was only acting in my best interests. "My father is a brilliant man," he said, dripping with false sincerity. "But he's 78. He doesn't understand the complexities of modern finances." I was protecting him from himself. The lie was so bald, so insulting, it hung in the courtroom air like a foul odor. The judge listened patiently. When he was done, she looked down at him from her bench. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "your father designed buildings to withstand the shifting earth. It seems your mother, however, designed legal documents to withstand the shifting morals of a greedy son." I had seen enough. The words struck Richard like a physical blow. He slumped in his chair, defeated. The ruling was swift and brutal. The court affirmed that the reversion clause was triggered the moment the demolition permit was filed. Ownership of the property at 112 Oak Street reverted fully and immediately to me, Arthur Finch. The quitclaim deed was declared void. Furthermore, the judge found overwhelming evidence of financial abuse and froze Richard's primary assets pending a full discovery and restitution hearing. Richard and Cynthia sat stunned, their faces ashen. Their grand plan, their comfortable future built on the bones of my home and my life, had been utterly annihilated in a public forum. The humiliation was total. They had tried to shame me at a private family dinner, and in return, their greed was laid bare for the public record, enshrined forever in a court transcript. Public humiliation for public restoration. After the ruling, as they were shuffling out, Richard stopped in front of me. His eyes were burning with a desperate, pathetic fury. "You'll die in that house alone," he hissed, his voice low and trembling, "and there will be no one left to mourn you." It was his last, pathetic attempt to wound me, to claim some kind of victory in his own desolation. He still didn't understand. I looked at him, not with anger, but with a profound and weary pity. "I have never been alone in that house, Richard," I said softly. "Eleanor is in every beam, every floorboard. You, on the other hand, seem to have been alone for a very long time." I saw the flicker of comprehension, of a deeper loss than just money, flash in his eyes before he turned and walked away, his wife trailing behind him like a shadow. Chloe approached me hesitantly. "Grandpa," she began, tears welling in her eyes. I pulled her into a hug. "You were so brave," I whispered. "Your grandmother would have been incredibly proud of you." She clung to me, a small island of integrity in the wreckage of her family. "Can I still come visit?" she asked. Her voice muffled against my shoulder. "My dear," I said, "this house will always be your home too. That's what the rules are for." The next few weeks were about reclaiming my space. I directed the movers myself, putting every piece of furniture back in its rightful place. I aired out the rooms, letting the November sunlight, however pale, chase out the lingering chill of Richard's brief, tyrannical reign. I felt the house settle around me, as if it were breathing a sigh of relief. It was a living thing, and we had both survived a great trauma. George handled the financial restitution. It turned out Richard had leveraged his future asset, my house, for several large loans to fund the development project. With the asset gone, the banks called in the loans. His accounts were drained to pay back what he owed me and the penalties levied by the court. He was financially ruined, hoisted by his own petard of leveraged greed. He had wanted everything and was now left with nothing. One crisp December morning, I sat at Eleanor's desk. The sun glinted off the polished oak. The scent of old paper and wood was no longer a smell of regret, but one of victory and continuity. I opened the secret compartment again. Beneath where the legal documents had been, there was one last thing, a single folded piece of stationery, in Eleanor's familiar, elegant script. It wasn't a long letter, just a few sentences. "My dearest Arthur," it began, "I hope you never have to read this. I hope our son remembers the man you taught him to be. But if he does not, if greed makes him forget, know that I built this one last wall to protect you. A house is just wood and nails, but a home is a promise. I will always keep my promises." The ink was slightly faded, a message from the past to secure the future. I folded the letter and placed it back in its hiding spot. She had known. Somehow, she had sensed the potential for weakness, the hairline fracture in our son's character, and had quietly, lovingly built a failsafe. My revenge wasn't just my own. It was the final, brilliant execution of her last loving act. The thought filled me not with sadness, but with a deep, abiding peace. We were still a team. A few days before Christmas, a large envelope arrived. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a cashier's check for a substantial sum, the first of the court-ordered restitution payments from Richard's liquidated assets, and a short typed note from his attorney stating that Mr. Finch would have no further contact. It was a cold, transactional end to a father-son relationship. I looked at the check, at the sterile numbers that represented the monetary value of my son's betrayal. It felt meaningless. The real victory wasn't the money, it was the silence in my house. It was the sunlight on the floorboards. It was the knowledge that the promise I made to Eleanor, to protect this home and what it stood for, had been kept. The memories were safe now, protected by a wall of oak and the unbreakable strength of a wife's love. I put the check on the desk next to Eleanor's reading glasses. I didn't need it. I stood up and walked to the large bay window in the living room, looking out at the backyard where I had once taught a little boy how to throw a baseball. The lawn was covered in a light dusting of snow, pure and clean. I felt a quiet click inside me, the sound of a chapter ending. I picked up the phone and dialed Chloe's number. "I'm making a grandmother's Christmas cookies," I said. "Come help me."